Well, welcome to worship. We are so glad to have you with us. My name is Jeff Huber. I am lead pastor here at Summit Church, and this is the second weekend of Advent. The second weekend of Advent is moving us closer and closer to Christmas. And each week, as we move through this season, we're going to light another candle. So last week we lit one candle. This week we're going to light two candles, and the Condrat family is going to do that for us and share some words. Before they do that, if you have a candle with you, we encourage you to light it. If you haven't put together an Advent wreath yet in your home, that's okay. Maybe just get out any kind of candle and light it. It's a great way to remember that even as things keep getting darker and darker, there's a light that will come in the darkness. And so let's worship together as we remember that light coming into the darkness this second week of Advent.
Our lists are long, even in this strange mess where we live these days. And we want to do right, we want to be safe, but we want to be able to enjoy the season. We've got work to do to put right what has gone wrong, to heal what is broken, to mend the relationships, to prepare for the company that will come.
The prophet Isaiah reminds us that there's work to be done. Prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. When God comes in, then healing is to be found. But we need to make the way. We need to open the door into our lives.
So we light these candles as a sign of our faith that the God we worship is not far from us, that we can clear the way for the God to come and dwell with us. We light these candles in faith that company is coming.
O come, Emmanuel.
Let us pray. Come, Lord Jesus, give us faith and teach us the ways of peace. Amen.
Well, again, my name is Eli, and I'm so grateful to be with y'all. I'm the director of worship here at Summit Church, and just as Jeff shared, we are in the season of Advent together. This season where we remember the coming of Jesus in the flesh, right, in history, and we look for the return of Jesus in this sort of eschatological way, to use a big theological word, I guess. But we also are open to the inbreaking of the kingdom of God and the presence of Christ in and through our own hearts every day. And that's kind of what the season of Advent is about, is being open to and looking for the ways that Christ is active and coming into the world. And so we get to sing songs about inviting the King of Heaven to come into our hearts and to shape the world into the kingdom that is yet to come. And so with that, we're going to sing this song, King of Heaven, as an Advent song together. Jesus, let your kingdom come here. Let your will be done here in us. Jesus, there is no one greater. You alone are Savior. Show the world your love. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save. In your mighty name, King of heaven, come. We are children of your mercy, rescued for your glory. We cry, Jesus, set our hearts towards you, that every eye would see you lifted high. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. Oh, King of heaven, come. Of heaven, come. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven, come. And oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord. Amen. Would you all pray with me? Lord God, we are so grateful that you are the King of heaven and that you care for each one of us. God, I ask that you would continue to give us an openness of heart, that we would be open to the King of heaven inhabiting our hearts, that we would open ourselves with adoration toward you and prepare ourselves for your presence, not just in some distant future way, but prepare ourselves for your presence now. Prepare ourselves for how you desire to be present with us, in us, to shape us, and even through us. I ask that you would continue to form us through our time together, through your word, through preaching, through singing, through prayer, through all of these things that we're doing as we're engaged in worship together, that you would continue to bind us miraculously by the Holy Spirit and shape us into the living presence of Christ today. And we ask that by the power of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Well, again, it is great to be with you. My name is Jeff Huber. I'm lead pastor here at Summit, and we want to let you know a few things that are going on in the life of our church. First of all, if you haven't yet done so, and you're on one of our platforms where you can sign in, just let us know you're here. It's a great way for us to connect with you and get to know that you're worshiping with us. We also have for you these great boxes that we have for Christmas, and I wanted to share them with you. There's been a little confusion. Some of you have thought, I think, that they're just for kids or youth or family, and that's not true. They're for everyone. So we hope you go on our website, register to come by and pick one up next week. And inside there's a cookie dough mix. There is some great stuff that you can make an ornament kit. There's some marshmallows, hot chocolate, and there's also going to be meditation moments for you to use. So all that will be in here. We hope you'll register and come pick up one of these because we want to make sure you have one. We can also arrange to leave them for you out front if you need to come by one of the other times that we're not here. Our office is open during this time on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, and you can call and make an appointment to come in. The doors are locked at this point, so when you come, we'll just have to let you in if you need to get in the building for anything. We do have FM radio that we're working on having as part of our services, so if you know somebody who doesn't have access to watching online, you should be able to come in the parking lot either Saturday night at 5:30 or Sunday morning at 9 a.m. and hear hear the services, and we're going to work on doing something on Christmas Eve with that as well. So keep your eyes and ears peeled to our website and our announcements for all those things. We have a Christmas offering that we're doing this year, and like every year, we give it beyond the walls of our church. It'd be designated for Christmas, and you can give online in lots of different ways. There's a slide here where you can see all those options, and that helps basically help pay for all the Christmas boxes we're giving away, putting together all the Christmas Eve services, and then we have the special Christmas service. You're going to hear a bit about it in my sermon today. So we just thank you for your ability and willingness to give. We know for many, this is not a time where that can be done because just the pandemic has hit us all in different ways, and those of you who have been blessed, your continued gifts really make a difference here in this community and around the world. So thank you. Let's prepare our hearts now for the message. We continue in an Advent series in which we're talking about peace, and we're talking about it piece by piece, literally recognizing that God brings to us peace in the pieces of the Advent season and in the coming of Christ in particular. You know, there's something that many of us have kind of got to skip this year, depending on what's been going on in your life. But, you know, a lot of times we have family over for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, right? And when that happens, what do you normally do right before they come? You do like a mass clean like crazy, right? Get everything ready so everybody come over. And since we haven't been getting together as much, some of us have missed that. But can I tell you, Advent is a bit like that. Advent is the season where we prepare our hearts and ourselves for the coming of Christ, and partly we do that by paying attention to what's going on the inside of us. One of the things that concerns me greatly during this time of pandemic is that we have maybe skipped some of the things that we normally would do this season to help us get ready for something like the birth of Christ. You see, Advent has always been the church's way of getting ready, not just for the birth of Christ, but for the second coming of Christ. How we realize and we believe that Christ will come again. And you know, it might not happen in our earthly life, but all of us have one thing in common, and that is we're all going to die someday. And what we believe is when we die, we enter into the presence of Christ. So we're preparing ourselves for that day as well. Can I just tell you, as a pastor, I have done funerals for all kinds of people who left the house in the morning to go to work or go somewhere, and they never made it home that night, and they weren't planning for it. The truth is that none of us know the day or the time when any of that's going to happen, whether it's Jesus coming back in fullness or whether it's us leaving this earthly life. We don't know exactly when that happens, but what we do during Advent is ask ourselves, am I ready? Have I gotten myself ready? And part of what we recognize in this season is that God wants us to have a sense of peace, a sense of assurance that when that time comes, we will be ready. You see, our spiritual lives are something we're meant to spend and focus time on during this season as we get closer and closer to Advent. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the way that church has really always talked about it, which is by looking at some of the different characters in the story leading up to the birth of Jesus. One of them is John the Baptist. Oftentimes, we spend some time listening to him and hearing him because he was a cousin of Jesus who helped prepare the way for the coming of the king. And that's often the language we use. We're going to prepare the way. Now, John the Baptist, if you don't know his story, let me give you a little recap, all right? His parents were Zechariah, who was a priest in the temple in Jerusalem, and his mother was Elizabeth, who was a cousin of Mary. That's how John and Jesus are related. And the two of them are older when they have their child, and Zechariah is in the temple and he hears an angel. He has a visitation and he's told to name this child that he's going to have, which is going to be a miraculous birth for them since they're older and they've never been able to have children, to name him John. And by the way, the word John simply means the Lord is gracious. And so it is that that John is born, and I want to give you a little bit of an idea of where all this happens, because it will give you a better sense of what's going on in the story as we look at John the Baptist today. So up on the video screen, we're going to put this on full screen so you can see this map of Israel. And up in the top is Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, and this region down below, where I just circled, is Bethlehem, and this is Ein Kerem, where John the Baptist was born. So Jesus, John the Baptist weren't that far apart when they were born. At the very top, you're going to see the Sea of Galilee coming down into the Dead Sea. We're going to zoom in. This is the Dead Sea. Over on the left-hand side is Ein Kerem. So as we zoom in, notice it's all green and lush over in this region. This is Jerusalem, which is a large city. And what we believe is that, and this is Bethlehem, which is in kind of this area in between, and what we believe is John moved over to this region, which is called the wilderness of Judea. And we believe he moved here because his parents may have died when he was younger because they were older, and he lived in this region and ended up in a monastery down on the edge of the Dead Sea called Qumran. So the edge of the Dead Sea is here, and you're going to see Qumran, which I'm going to circle here for you. This is where we believe John the Baptist spent his maybe younger years and where he kind of grew up. And one of the reasons this is important is just because of some of the things that he says and he does as we read about his story, because he probably lived with a group of folks called the Essenes. What I want you to know about is the wilderness area they lived in is not like the Weminuche wilderness, okay? It is dry, it is arid, it is deserty. It's not green and lush at all. Instead, it's kind of barren, if you will, but there's a beauty to it as well. Probably John lived there with this group of the Essenes because they would take in children whose parents had died. And once again, most likely it is that John's parents may have died when he was younger because they were older, and he goes to live with the Essenes, and so he takes on many of their practices. The Essenes were known as people who, lived an ascetic life. We know something about them because we have a lot of their writings, and we have Josephus, the first century historian, who wrote about them in particular. And when they moved to this region on the Dead Sea, the reason they did it was because they wanted to get away from the city. They wanted to get away from people. They felt like the way to really connect with God is through an intimate life with God that is set apart or separates them from everyone else. And so I want to take you to Qumran. I've been there a couple of different times with different groups of the Holy Land, so we have some video footage I want to share with you. And so you're going to see that here. This is the Dead Sea, and next to the Dead Sea is Qumran. You're going to see the caves, the desert, the wilderness. This is the kind of region where John the Baptist lived, and these are the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is the library cave in the monastery. The Dead Sea Scrolls were the scrolls that have a lot of ancient texts in them. And then there are all these baths that you will see as you walk around the ruins of Qumran. They were called mikvahs, and mikvahs were literally collected rainwater, and you would enter into them, and there would be a ritual kind of purification, if you will, and then you would come out usually the other side. And the idea was that you would do this 6 or 7 times a day, because that was what prepared you, if you will, for communing with God. So you had to do all these rituals and do them just right. And that's the part of the community that John was in next to the Dead Sea. You may have heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls because, well, it's one of those places where the Essenes had kept them all, and they're in really good shape. And in doing that, we have actually some of the original text, if you will, going back to the time of not only Jesus, but before that, hundreds of years before that. We have Psalms and other things that you find in those scrolls. But one of the things that we read about John the Baptist now it's interesting because he's in all the Gospels in the beginning, even before Jesus arrives. And in Mark's gospel, it actually starts, there's no birth story in Mark's gospel. It actually starts with John the Baptist. And here's what we read. This is the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. It began just as the prophet Isaiah had written, "Look, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare your way. He is a voice shouting in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord's coming." And John was a part of this group of Essenes that would have known this text that is actually from Isaiah that is quoted here by Mark. And then he would have been basically preparing himself for the coming of Christ. And eventually he becomes the one that preaches to get basically people ready for the coming of Christ. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls are fascinating because some of the texts that we have in there are ones that you have in your Bible. One of them is this one. This is Psalm 85, which is one of the Psalms we're going to read today. It's obviously in ancient Hebrew, so we're not going to read it off of there. But here is what we read in this Psalm that once again the Essenes would have read as well as John the Baptist. Lord, you poured out blessings on your land. You restored the fortunes of Israel. You forgave the guilt of your people. Yes, you covered all their sins. You held back your fury. You kept back your blazing anger. Now restore us again, O God of our salvation. Put aside your anger against us once more. Will you be angry with us always? Will you prolong your wrath to all generations? Won't you revive us again so your people can rejoice in you? And then I love this. Show us your unfailing love, O Lord, and grant us your salvation. I listen carefully to what God the Lord is saying, for he speaks peace. He speaks peace to his faithful people. But let them not return to their foolish ways. Surely his salvation is near to those who fear him. So our land will be filled with his glory. Unfailing love and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth springs up from the earth, and righteousness smiles down from heaven. Yes, the Lord pours down his blessings. Our land will yield its beautiful harvest. Righteousness goes as a herald before him, preparing the way for his steps. These are words that John would have known. He would have prayed. The Essenes would have prayed. And this is the idea that something is coming. And then in the midst of a really difficult time, by the way, Psalm 85 is written and people are struggling, but the writer, probably David or someone in his name, basically just says, look, peace is coming. And this is what John the Baptist is trying to tell and trying to say, that peace is coming. Now, once again, the Essenes believed in purification. So you had to get all clean and just right to experience God and to experience the things that are named in this psalm. And this is where John the Baptist begins to separate from the Essenes. You see, the Essenes said, let's get away, let's purify ourselves, let's get forgiveness and all that, and do that on our own and be holy. And John says, actually, this should be for all people. You shouldn't have to come and live in the monastery and experience this. And so what begins to happen is John begins to move out beyond where just the Essenes are. He separates himself from this group. And he says, look, God cares about all people. And God is coming for everyone, not just for those who have set themselves apart. He says this is meant to be good news because God is not the God who's just going to come if you've got it all figured out just right. God's the God of the second and third and fourth and fifth chance. And that's what Jesus lives out in his ministry. So John is preparing people for that kind of king, that kind of Savior, which is going to come. And so John moves. And so on the video screen, you're going to see this zoomed in area. And once again, over on the left is Jerusalem and Kerem. This is Qumran. And he moves over here to the Jordan River. And the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. And I've been to this spot. This is myself with Kay Neal, who was one of our folks who went. And we baptized folks or remembered our baptism in the Jordan River, and this is just next to that area of Qumran. And this is where John comes and where he begins to preach, and people come by the hundreds to hear him because they're excited about this message that God is remembering his people, that God cares about them. And what John preached that was the beginning of the good news that Jesus was bringing. So he lays out the groundwork. Now, you might wonder, why should we care about the differences between the Essenes and John the Baptist? And here's why. Because we still have this debate today. It still happens in churches. This kind of division, if you will, over who the church is for, what the church is for, and who Jesus came for. You see, the Essenes said it was for people who had to get their act together and then God would show up. But John the Baptist says, no, it's the other way around. You come with all your brokenness, with all your hurt, with all your ache, with all your heartache, and you don't have to do all the rituals of purifications. Instead, you just come and you turn your heart to God. There are some churches where in order to become a member, you have to come and pass a test almost, and hear all the, be able to name all the things and quote Bible verses and all that. And that's fine. That's one way to do it. But the idea is that you have to become a saint and then you get in. But you know what Jesus and John the Baptist said is actually it's for everyone, because none of us, we're all imperfect. All of us fall short. And so Jesus is coming for everyone, and you don't have to have your act together. You don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to do all the religious rituals just right. You could just come and bring yourself to God. I think of the woman who came she came to a Methodist church and she went to see the pastor, and she said, Pastor, I'm really worried. I'm concerned about this church. And he said, really, why? And she said, well, I was in church the other day and I looked behind me and there was a guy who I know is having an affair. And then I noticed a woman came forward, and I know she's an alcoholic, and she came forward for communion and to be prayed over. And then I noticed as I was leaving a guy that I've been to his workplace and been to his business, and I've seen him and I heard him cuss, and here he was in church. She said, I'm concerned, what kind of church is this anyway? And the pastor said, well, this is a Jesus kind of church. He said, shouldn't this be a place where if you're struggling with alcohol or your marriage or your anger and bitterness that causes you to just blurt out, words that are offensive, shouldn't this be the place you could come and find healing? Well, she didn't agree, and she left, didn't come back. You see, the truth is we have to kind of make a decision as people of faith. Is the faith that we cling to one that asks us to be perfect? Or can we bring all of ourselves, all of our imperfections, all those things to God? There's no better place on a weekend for people who are struggling with all those things to come than to come and experience the good news that's offered. I think this is how the church and what the church is supposed to be. Jesus, if you read the Gospels, hung out with people that the religious leaders didn't like him hanging out with. They called them prostitutes, tax collectors, notorious sinners. I think of the fact that Jesus was at a religious leader's house, and a woman came and poured oil on his feet and cried, and her tears came upon his feet, and she took her hair and she wiped his feet, and he saw her. And Simon, the religious leader in that story, Jesus says, Simon, do you even see her? Because Simon's kind of worked up. He's like, why is this woman here? What's she doing here? And Jesus says, do you see her? You see, I came to see her. Do you see her? And then Jesus told stories about a kid that grew up and had everything that he could ever want, and he decided to go off on his own and take his inheritance, and he squandered it all, and he lived kind of in ways that were not so great, and then he had nothing, and he found himself hanging out with the pigs, and he comes home, and he's going to come home and grovel at his father's feet, but before the father, before the father hardly sees him, he doesn't care about his past, he just runs up and he embraces him, and he welcomes him back, and he throws him a party. I mean, there's story after story of Jesus showing up in those moments and saying, you don't have to have your act together to come here. Instead, come and I will meet you where you're at. When the religious leaders were upset with Jesus and they said, why are you always hanging out with these people? You know what he said? He said, hey, it's not the well who need a doctor, it's the sick. And the truth was those religious leaders, just like you and I, need it just as much as anyone else, because sometimes the hardest things are going on inside of us. And sometimes it's inside of us that we need to reckon with and deal with. It's that spiritual pride that gets a hold of us, that arrogance that can happen. All those things that literally can well up inside of us that Jesus came for. And John the Baptist is preparing the way for that. You see, John the Baptist figured out that pleasing God was not about getting away and doing all the rituals and getting them just right. Ministry was about going to the people and saying and shouting in the wilderness and saying, hey, a king is coming. And here's one of the things I really struggle with, I have to tell you, when it comes to being a pastor and when it comes to the church and the Christian faith today. You see, as I talk with people who don't want to have anything to do with the church or Jesus, the Christian faith, it's not usually about the Bible, that they don't believe the Bible, or they don't think it's true, or it's not usually even about whether they think Jesus is true or not. Really, what I hear is this: is it really good news? Doesn't sound like good news. I got to have my act together. I got to have it all just right before I can come and receive this thing. I got to get my act together before I can walk in the door of the church. I got to have it all figured out. That's not good news. That's just like the rest of the world. And so one of the questions I think John the Baptist is saying, is the good news really good news? Is it really good? Are we really living this out and recognizing this is the kind of way that John the Baptist came to say, hey, I came for everyone to experience this kind of good news. It's not about all the rules and getting it just right. And here's the way John the Baptist puts it, and this is from the Message version of the Bible. I love this. As John preached, he said, the real action comes next. The star in the drama, who's Jesus, to whom I'm a mere stagehand, will change your life. I love this. I'm baptizing you here in the river, turning your old life in for the kingdom life. So you come and you get in the water, and this new thing begins. His baptism that comes from Jesus, a holy baptism by the Holy Spirit, will change you from the inside out. I love this image. It's the inside out is the way it starts. The word that's often used, and the word that's translated from change from the inside out, is metanoia. And metanoia means to change your mind and then to think differently. And then we begin to live differently. That's literally what this phrase means. You know, the truth is we realize, if we're honest, that we sometimes hurt God, we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. And Jesus came to say, I know what that experience, I know where you're at. I'm coming to you right where you are. And when we engage our head and our hearts and our hands and we start doing things differently, then we experience this metanoia, this change, this shift. I was thinking about this, sometimes my wife and I, something will happen with us and I'll say, hey, I'm sorry. And sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes we say, I'm sorry, and we do that because we just want to kind of move on, and we don't necessarily really mean it. You know what happens after that? Usually a long period of silence until we finally come back together and we really, truly apologize and say, because here's what we'll often say. I love it when people say, I'm sorry your feelings were hurt. It's kind of the non-apology apology, right? It's not, you're sorry they took it wrong, but you're not really sorry you said it, or you did it. And really, the change of heart is about being honestly saying, what I've done, my heart aches for that, and I want to change, and I want to shift, and I want to do things differently. Because the truth is, we're all broken. We all fall short. We all make mistakes. The way that this is talked about in our Christian faith is the word sin. And I always remind you, sin's not meant to be a word we beat each other up with. It just describes a relationship. And sin in Greek is hamartia, and it means simply to miss the mark. It means there's this way you want to go, but you don't end up going that way. And I remind you that in our tradition, in the Wesleyan heritage, John Wesley talked about sin. We're supposed to love God and love others as we love ourselves. When we're apart from God, when we're apart from others, when there's a gap, there's separation between us and God, us and others, when there's separation inside of ourselves, it just describes the brokenness there. Folks, we all say things we wish we hadn't said. We all do things we wish we hadn't done. I do it, you do it, we all do it. And part of this idea of restoration, of metanoia, is going, God, I don't want to live with that anymore. I want to let go of that. I was visiting recently with a business owner that goes to our church, and he was saying he's trying to create a culture in his business where, he's really encouraging his employees to smile at the people who are coming in, even during the pandemic, even though there's a mask underneath, to maybe smile with their eyes, and to give each other some encouragement to the people they work with and all that. And we talked about how that's hard sometimes when we don't feel that ourselves. When we can't smile at ourselves, it's hard to smile at others. A big part of this is recognizing that God sees us in many ways a lot differently than we see ourselves when we look in the mirror. That God sees us more deeply. He sees all of us, and He loves us right there in that place. And when we finally recognize that, we have something to give, because we can't give what we don't have. And so a big part of this, John the Baptist preparing the way, is for Jesus to come and say, I see you right where you are. I love you right where you are, and I love you enough not to leave you there. I want you to come and follow me and go in a new direction. This is what we're encouraged to do. And they asked John the Baptist, they said, what does this look like, this new life, this new king that's coming? What does it look like? And he fleshes that out in Luke and Matthew a bit more than we read in Mark. In Luke 3, the crowds asked, what should we do then? We've been baptized. What do we do now? And it's interesting. He just gets pretty practical. He says, John replied, if you have 2 shirts, give one to the poor, give one to someone else. If you have food, share it with those who are hungry. Even corrupt tax collectors came to be baptized, and they asked, Teacher, what should we do? And he replied, collect no more taxes than the government requires. In other words, he said, just do your job. What should we do? Asked the soldiers. John replied, don't extort money or make false accusations, and be content with your pay. Here's this idea. It's this big idea that he says, John says it's about living in a right relationship. And Jesus is going to come and say, here's what that looks like. And we look at him and we see him and how he offers and gives his life, and he cares for others, and said, once you've said yes to Jesus, then you realize, oh, I don't have to live for myself anymore. By the way, during this season, as we get closer to Christmas, one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to consume a lot. You know, it starts with Thanksgiving and eating a lot, and then we eat a lot all throughout the season, and we buy stuff and we consume stuff. And you know what John the Baptist is kind of saying? He's kind of saying what we tell you here a lot. Christmas is not your birthday. It's Jesus' birthday. And so part of what happens is we recognize, oh yeah, because if we make it all about ourselves, eventually it becomes hollow and meaningless. And so what we're encouraged to do is to do it differently. So let me just give you one example. One of the things our Summit students have been doing over the last year, they've been doing meeting, and they were going one-on-one meeting with people in Sunshine Gardens. Many of them didn't have family around, so they would go meet with them and do things with them. Well, we had to stop doing that. And so we write cards and do other things. And Morgan Hollick, our youth pastor, was really concerned about some of the residents that we've been connecting with, and she called and talked to the woman who's the program director there, and they were talking, and the woman was crying and saying they're lonely, they're isolated, I'm worried about them. And so they came up with this idea, let's do pajamas. And so the kids in the youth ministry and some of the families are buying pajamas, and they're going to write a card and a note, and they're going to send it to them and say, hey, we remember you, we know you. I mean, it's about living out you see, Jesus came in the flesh. It's called incarnation. It's called Emmanuel, God with us. And this is what we're invited to do during this season, to think and to live and to be differently. You know, I titled this sermon, Straight Up Peace in a Broken Down World, because what John basically says is there's this broken path, and it will be made straight, and it will become this new thing, and God will do this new thing in your life and in your heart as you get closer and closer to the coming of Christ and to being near him. We recognize that it's not our birthday, that it's Jesus' birthday. And that as he comes, it changes us. It changes our minds, our hearts, and eventually our lives. So our Christmas offering this year is going to two places that we wanted to do at Easter, but COVID happened right before Easter, and we had to kind of table that. So we're coming back to these two groups. One of them is Habitat for Humanity here in La Plata County. That's our local one, providing housing for people who need that. But the other one is our international one, which is the International Treasure House Ministries in Kenya. And I want you to hear about this ministry today because it really is about bringing peace in a wholeness, salvation in a broken place. Let's take a listen.
The Treasure House was created to take in these abandoned and vulnerable children. It also started rescuing young mothers that had been married off in the Maasai communities. And so we take in these moms, we nurture them, we teach them how to be mothers. We also work alongside of their families. We go to court with them, for them. We have a lawyer that works with us in order to bring justice, because oftentimes justice does not happen unless someone is standing up and being a voice for our kids. At the Treasure House, they receive medical care, they receive counseling, they receive good nutrition, they receive education, life skills, and hands-on trainings. But most of all, we give them a spiritual training to know that they are children of the living God that loves them, that will never leave them or forsake them.
I love this idea that's called the Treasure House because the children and the women they bring in there are treasures. They're made by God to be loved by God, and we want them to know that. And you get to be a part of that this Christmas season with our Christmas offering. And Advent is about waiting on and remembering that the words of John the Baptist are a promise, and that Jesus ushers in this new kind of kingdom, this kingdom that's going to change us. And it's something we can't just keep it to ourselves. We're meant to, when you come into our church, when you're here in person, or when you look on our website, it says our mission statement, which is to be the presence of Jesus Christ in the world. Well, what that means for us is to literally be bringing peace. In that psalm that we read earlier, it talked about peace and salvation being yoked together, like almost, they talked about the image of kissing each other. Because peace, salvation, wholeness is something we're meant to experience. Folks, I realize that many of us are struggling this season. And especially as we get closer to Christmas, it's like this isn't what we all anticipated or hoped for. But even in the middle of this broken down world, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with other kinds of things that cause us anxiety, we're offered straight up peace, wholeness. And it just takes us being willing to give our hearts to God. So I want to end with this. I had somebody call call me shortly after the election, and they were just kind of struggling because their kids were in one place and they were in another when it came to the election in terms of what they wanted to see happen, and it was causing a lot of anxiety. And there was just some words being said back and forth, and they weren't talking to each other. And it was getting close to Thanksgiving, and you know, I tend to get pretty direct when it comes to these kind of things. So this person was older, and I said, so how much longer do you think you're going to live? And they said, well, maybe 10 to 15 years. And I said, okay, because nothing really puts things in perspective than remembering our mortality. And I just said, look, the next 10 to 15 years you have with your family, do you want them to be defined by this anxiety you're feeling right now, this dissonance, this disconnection, this bitterness? Is that what you want? And they said, no, and it's probably not good for my health either to get all worked up about it. I said, exactly. So, part of what happens in these moments is we have to make a choice. And we make a choice, and I realize people have strong feelings about this, but do you really want to be separated from the people that you love and you care about? And so I sat with this person and we talked about a prayer they could pray for themselves and for their family, and to ask for forgiveness for themselves, for their hearts, the way they had gotten, and to pray for their family. And then we kind of role played what it would be like to talk to them. And so I had them do that, and they called their family and they kind of did a Zoom call, and they just said, hey, we don't want this to come between us and be this thing. And folks, sometimes peace is as simple as getting out of the prison of bitterness and anger and resentment and our opinions that we build for ourselves, which ends up being a lifelong sentence. And then we want people to come and live in our cell with us and make everybody miserable. Peace, the peace that Jesus offers, sometimes is as simple as the people in our lives that we love and care about the most, offering the same grace to them that Jesus offers to us. And that's how we end today. We are doing communion together, and so if you haven't gotten your elements together, you might quickly grab some to bring with you, and then we're going to pray over them. We have the elements with us here, and by the way, the chalice and the plate we have are from Bethlehem and that area near the monastery, and so we brought these back with us on our last trip. And as we prepare for this moment, I just want to remind you that the babe that was born in Bethlehem would grow to become a man who would give his life for everyone. And the night before he literally gave his life, he came to his friends, his disciples, and can I just tell you, many of them were kind of anxious about what was happening. And he took the bread and he said, this is my life, which is given for you. And he broke it and he said, whenever you eat this, remember the life that we have shared together and the life I give for you. This is good news. Good news that I see you, Jesus says, and I love you enough to do this for you. And likewise, he took the cup and he blessed it. He says, this is a cup of a new covenant. My blood poured out for you and for all for the forgiveness of your sin, of your brokenness, those things that separate you from God, from each other, from yourself. Whenever you drink this cup, remember. So I invite you, if you have your elements, if you don't, you can just pray with us, and you can go grab some elements and some things later if you want to remember. But I invite you to, if you have your elements, just kind of put your hands like this, and we're going to pray over them together. This is called the prayer. What we remember is that Jesus came, and John said he brought the Holy Spirit with him, so we pray the prayer of the Holy Spirit over these elements. Would you bow your heads and let's pray. God, pour out your Holy Spirit upon these gifts of the bread and the cup. May they be for us the bread of life and the cup of salvation. May they remind us of the truth that the worst thing is never the last thing. May they remind us that you long for us to have metanoia, a change of heart that happens from the inside out, a change of our minds, and it changes our lives, and we begin to live differently, and we have peace, we have wholeness. God, I pray for, whatever it is that people have thought about as we've talked about this message today, for the places where there's brokenness or hurt in their lives. I pray for those tapes that play in our own heads that keep us from loving and caring about ourselves and seeing ourselves the way you do. God, I pray that you would literally come into us as we receive these gifts of the bread and the cup, and that you would change us from the inside out. God, we thank you for this peace that you offer us today. In the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
As we continue in our worship and we practice this time of communion together as we reflect on the peace of Christ coming into our world, there's a song that I think is just so beautiful that's inviting the peace of God to reign in our hearts. And it really does I think this song really gives voice to some of the ways that we need some of that metanoia. We need some of our minds change, our thinking changed, and then our lives to change out of that as we experience the peace of God together. And so I'm going to invite us to sing this song called Peace on Earth. We come before you with hardships and fears. We lay down our burdens, Lord, draw us near. Blind to injustice, we've turned our eyes. Lord, heal our brokenness, raise us to life. Peace on earth, peace on earth. Lord, hear our prayer, your peace on earth, peace on earth, peace on earth. Lord, hear our prayer, your peace on earth. Peace, peace, peace. Jesus, our Savior, you've made us one. Walls of division torn down by love. The cross has redeemed us, all penance paid, love through forgiveness. We have been saved. Peace on earth, peace on earth. Lord, hear our prayer, your peace on earth, peace on earth, peace on earth. Lord, hear our prayer, your peace on earth. Peace, peace, peace. Peace, peace, peace. Friend of the widow, hope to the poor, proof to the doubting heart, end of all wars. Mercy to sinners, light of the world, all power and authority. Lord, speak your word. Peace on earth, peace on earth. Lord, hear our prayer, your peace on earth, peace on earth, peace on earth. Lord, hear our prayer, your peace on earth. Peace, peace, peace. Peace, peace, peace. As we continue, we're going to sing one more song where we reflect on these stories of the life of Christ being incarnate in history, of the birth of Jesus, as we remember those stories, it's not just a remembering of like something that happened then, but it's as if we get to inhabit the story and think about what would it be like if the angel came to us? What would it be like if I was a shepherd just, minding the sheep in the field? And the angel came to me and said, there's a baby being born that is the fullness of God. That this presence of Christ is coming into the world, that as we remember these stories, we're not invited to just say, oh yeah, that's a good story that I remember, which it is. But it's a story that we get to actually live and inhabit, and we get to hear those words spoken to us even. And so let's remember this story in that way together. While shepherds watched their flocks by night, all seated on the ground, the angel of the Lord came down, and glory shone around. Fear not, said he, for mighty dread had seized their troubled minds. Glad tidings of great joy I bring to you and all mankind. To you in David's town this day is born of David's line the Savior, who is Christ the Lord, and this shall be the sign. The heavenly babe you there shall find, to human view displayed, all meanly wrapped in swaddling bands, and in a manger laid. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Christ is born. Hallelujah. Sing hallelujah. Hallelujah. Christ is born. Oh, glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace. Goodwill henceforth from God to man, begin and never cease. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Christ is born. So glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace. Goodwill henceforth from God to man, begin and never cease. Amen. Let's pray together. God, we are so grateful. We're grateful for the presence of Jesus in history. We're grateful that you, knowing the fullness of Godness, chose to not hold that to yourself, but to empty yourself and to be born as a human. We're grateful for the life that you've given and for the life that you give us now. And I ask that you would continue to give us the grace of open hearts, that Christ, you might be born within us, and that we might be shaped anew through that process. God, we know it's not always comfortable. In fact, it's rarely comfortable to experience transformation. But we want to put our trust in you. We want to put our trust in you, our hope in you, our faith in you, that you have a vision of restoring all things, of bringing true peace, of bringing wholeness and restoration in the world, in our hearts, in our families, in our homes, in our communities, that you're doing that in us and through us. And so I ask that you would continue to do that work as you so faithfully do. We ask that by the power of the Holy Spirit and in the name of your Son, Jesus, who taught us to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. As we end, I want to remind you that on our website we have meditation moments each week for the week ahead. And so you get to go a bit deeper on what we talked about today, and there's some great, you're going to learn a lot more about John the Baptist this week if you get these, and kind of how to prepare yourself as you move towards Advent and Christmas. So I hope you'll grab one of them, pull it off the website. You can print it off or just use it there. You can also find it on our app. And then I want to remind you one more time that we have our Christmas boxes. You go online and you can sign up for when you come by and pick them up. It'll be not this week, but the next week. And so we hope that you'll come by and grab one of them and have it in your home and use it. We have a great Christmas Eve service we're putting together that you can check out online. It'll be a part that'll kind of use the boxes. So I hope you'll grab one of those and prepare for Christmas Eve. I think it's going to be a great Christmas Eve, even though it's going to be a lot different than it has been in the past. As we leave this place, as we leave this time of worship, I just remind you that Christ came to bring straight up peace in a broken world, to bring peace that would bring wholeness, shalom, salvation, and that would calm our troubled hearts, that would literally come inside, and we would be changed from the inside out. So we change our minds and our hearts, and as a result we change our lives, not just here, but for eternity. I pray you would discover that. Go in peace and serve God. Amen.